What's up, bros? Welcome back to a very special New Year's episode of the Bros You Knows. I'm your host, Viet, and we're going to be joined by one of my favorite fight analysts in the game right now, Robin Black. We're going to discuss UFC 207, and then we're going to look at the state of the UFC and MMA in general heading into 2017. We had a ton of fun chatting with him. Please enjoy. Hey, what's up, Robin? This is Viet with BBYK. How are you?
Hey, man, doing good. How's this sound?
It sounds great.
Sweet. How's your day?
Oh, it's been good so far. How's yours been?
Good. Where do you live?
I live in DC.
Oh, wicked. Super cool.
Yeah, how was your Christmas?
Yeah, it was really good, man. Just totally relaxed. Took a couple of days off. You really don't realize how pulled into, your emails and Twitter and the internet and stuff you are until you take a couple of days and turn that off,
Oh, yeah, for sure. We're being joined by Robin Black. It's a man who wears many hats, musician, a martial artist, and now a fight analyst for the Fight Network. And you actually have a show on Fight Network now called Ask Robin Black.
Yeah. I guess my main job, what I think my main job is to break down fights, or at least it has been over the last few years, is just look at the little intricacies and the details and the beauty and the magic that's going on in a fight. And then, we're a 24-hour combat sports channel. So you also talk about everything, in some traditional TV roles and some, preview shows and post shows. So it's kind of a CNN of fights or a Food Network of fights up in Canada. So all day long, there's some different role or responsibility, or in my case, pleasure of talking about fights. The breakdowns is kind of what I've been doing, but the last, month or I guess 3 or 4 months, we started working on just a really open-ended podcast to, get past, I think, even the technical and into some of the, emotional and the philosophical and the spiritual of fighting, which is real and a part of everything we're seeing and just not something that we've, talked about a lot. It's been super fun. So I guess it's a podcast on iTunes and it's a video podcast on Fight Network. It's been really fun, man. I've really enjoyed it.
And I'd really recommend all of our listeners out there to go check that out. It's really awesome. Like we said, you were a musician. You had a glam rock band named Robin Black,
Yep.
formerly known as Robin Black and to Intergalactic Rock Stars. My question to you is there going to be a reunion tour?
About once every year or once every couple of years, there'll be, 3 weeks where we're not busy and it's something will come up somewhere where someone we know with a bigger venue or something happens, or Halloween or some reason. And I'll send 1 or 2 emails. Hey, are all you guys around? And most of us would love to do it. The truth is, though, I dedicate my whole life to my job / passion / gig, / calling, and that's fighting and martial arts. So, I was not a very good singer to begin with, and I've become a much worse one over the years as I, use my voice the way I use it now and stuff. So it's a once every couple of years thing, and it's really fun. I mean, truthfully, I love music, but I'm not a music obsessive the way I am a martial arts obsessive. But what I loved about it was performing, and I love trying to create, and I love doing art with talented people and stuff. But it happen again at some point, low on the list of sort of weekly or monthly priorities. That's for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that they would love to be a professional musician, and they would love to be a professional mixed martial artist. You got to do both, but in my opinion, kind of the opposite of how you would think someone would do it. You would think that maybe you were a martial artist first, and then you retire from the fight game, and then you become a musician. You were a musician first. You've always liked martial arts. You trained in Taekwondo when you were young.
Mhm.
You have a black belt in that. Tell us about the decision. You were, part of this rock band and the decision to kind of follow this other passion of yours, martial arts, and then actually become a professional martial arts fighter.
Well, I was definitely a martial artist, like you said first. Like as a kid, martial arts. I did gymnastics. I did high diving, things that like to move my body, and I just, was fascinated with the martial arts and punching and kicking and moving and blocking and the real basic fundamental root movements of what it was as a little kid. So that was always my thing, like right through high school and late high school or right around 17, 18, you know, I think it's not uncommon for people to kind of get away from the thing maybe that they've developed some attachment to and kind of explore other things. And I think it was, yeah, if I'm being honest and being honest with my own ego, you wanted people to look at you jumping around, and you saw that people in rock bands got lots of girls and they got to party, and you're restless. And I think that was a deviation from my real path. My path was martial arts. My life's path, I think, was martial arts. But this, deviation or artistic journey or whatever you want to call it, it was super valuable. Like, I learned about performing, and I learned about, how to not be too into yourself or too into your performance, to be more about, you know, um, what you were creating or what you were trying to create, or the audience themselves. And I learned about writing, and I learned about poetry a little bit, and I learned about hard work, and I learned about trying and pushing and striving for something. So it was really valuable. But as soon as there was a number of events in my life, like, just partying way too much when you're traveling around, and kind of shifting back from that, where the martial arts was suddenly, something I started doing again. And the second I did it, the second I went back, did some Muay Thai, I wanted to, rather than go back and do Taekwondo, which I had done, I wanted to explore some of the other things, did Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu. And immediately that was all I wanted to do. It was like, it was just so familiar. It was all that I wanted to do. And I'd worked in television and in entertainment, so I knew I wanted to do the kind of job I'm doing now. But I figured I had so much I had to learn to be able to do that, which led me to fighting, and eventually you're pushing that hard, and you want to test yourself, and you want to be scared, and you want to try and face failure. So I started fighting, but I did it with the knowledge that it was what I would do after the experience that would probably be my real gig. And now I'm in that I'm in the period of the best period of my life right now. I'm in the period of my life that everything else that I've done has led to this period, and I'm happy, and I love what I do every day. And yeah, it really is, if you're lucky and if you make a couple of good choices and get a lot of luck and some help and a bunch of things, I hope everybody finds a period like this where they are sitting there going, yes, I'm doing exactly what I should be doing. I really hope everybody has that experience one way or another at some point.
Yeah, just a real perfect transition for you, going from being a mixed martial artist to then being a fight analyst. You look at the sport, and it really tells you something about how young the sport is. You look at other professional sports, and you have these older guys, former athletes, that are the analyst. And you look at the Fox desk when they do a UFC on Fox show, and there are times when you have three current champions
Yeah.
that are talking to each other and break down the fight, which just kind of blows your mind, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it really is freaky. But they were analysts before they became champions. No, all of them. No, Dominic Cruz was a champion and an analyst. I mean, and maybe he was analyzing fights during that Mizugaki fight, kind of part of his history. So he had been a champion, and due to injury, he was no longer. But looking at, a third person perspective, like, first of all, you have to be fascinated. And the reason those guys at that desk, and I've met them all to some degree, varying degree, the reason that they're good is because they're deeply curious. They're fascinated. They want to know everything about it. They've learned things. I mean, Dom is a genius. Dan Hardy's brilliant. Brian Stan. I don't think Brian Stan looked at fighting that way at all until later. And then, he's the type of guy who can have that beginner's mind and a child curiosity about things. And those guys all got better by studying fighting. And it's one of those things. It's undeniable when you look at Bisping, Woodley, Cruz, and DC, And they all became champions after spending a few years of deep study of fighting from a third-person perspective. And that's not just a lesson for fighting. That's a lesson for everything. Whatever it is you do, analyze the work of that work. Analyze other people who do it. Analyze yourself doing it. I mean, you got to take that perspective. It's so valuable. You know, you're sometimes so deep in things that you don't have time to look at what they really are like. And if you can step outside yourself, it makes you see them better. It really is fascinating. But I'm lucky. I knew that I had that goal. And I also knew as I was developing along the path that there would be people like that. I didn't know if it would be Dominic Cruz or Cormier or whoever, but I knew there would be people like that come up that will be brilliant at doing the job I do and a famous fighter. And my job is to try to do something, while they're fighting, I'll be studying and try to study language and try to study presentation and try to study the philosophy and try to think about it different and look for as many different perspectives as possible and try and fail and do all these things so that, it's pretty hard to keep up with Dominic Cruz when he is just as good as me at what I do, maybe better, and he's a famous world champion. So that makes my job my passionate job to improve every day that much more necessary, but I love what I do, man. And it really is the coolest thing. And the last few days after Christmas slowed down and I unplugged from the internet a bit, I'm reading as many different books of as many different things as possible and applying them all to the study of fighting and the study of fights and the study of training. I'm now at a point where I'm starting to obsessively do it with anything. You look, obviously things like chess, but you look at baking, you look at gardening, they can all relate to the study of fighting and they can all relate to improvement. And fighting is about becoming a better fighter, is about self-improvement. And that is something I'm currently fascinated with.
Yeah, I think that's something that comes out in your breakdowns too. I actually wanted to talk with you about this. There's a lot of people that do very excellent fight breakdowns. You mentioned Dan Hardy, who he does really excellent fight breakdowns before big UFC cards. Luke Thomas is another person that I feel does a really great job of breaking down fights. You do a really good job of breaking down fights in your Robin fight breakdowns, but you usually take a different angle. I feel like with Dan Hardy, Luke Thomas, they have a certain way that they're going to talk about all of their fighters. And it almost seems like you try to come up with an out-of-the-box way of looking at it. Where do you find the inspiration to create these different fight breakdowns?
To me, I don't know how or why this is so. I know it's something I've cultivated to some degree. But, when I started doing fight breakdowns, there was a little group of us. There was the first thing I'd ever seen was a videotaped thing of I think it was BJJ Scout. It was just footage and writing on a screen. And then I'd read some Jack Slack, which I just loved. I just thought it was great. And right around the time I started, a guy named Lawrence Kenshin started. And honest to God, if there was anybody else doing this 4 and 5 years ago, I'd never seen them. So maybe there was, and maybe there was somebody excellent, but those were the only people that were doing it when I was doing it. The people, and we were all just obsessed with this idea. The goal was never create, it is a natural tendency that we have in everything that we do in the world, where we go, and I know I talked about this, and you mentioned my podcast, I know it's something I talk about a lot, but where we parrot things and where we imitate things. And we create this sort of ceremony around things or rituals. So, and people do it in everything. So the ritual that existed when myself and those 3 people, and I know for sure BJJ Scout had done quite a number before I ever did one. And Jack Slack had written a number of articles. And Lawrence was right around the same time. We kind of discovered each other. And we built this little pact. And our goal was, we got to make breakdowns a thing. We got to make this. Because we felt that in the S-curve of how you develop things, fighting started with its coverage being primarily done by people who didn't know anything about fighting. They were interested in the characters. And they were interested in the stories and the adventures of these people, the classic tale of a hero being tested by an enemy, and these were the stories that were told. And along with them was the story of who will this guy be the next number one contender? Where do you sit in the rankings? And who would you like to call out? And that was it. That was it. And a little bit of creative writing around there. A guy like Ben Folks would write similar perspectives, but he'd have an excellent view and an excellent, add a human element. But there was no study of fighting 5 years ago. And then around a little bit before that time, people were making videos, and we'd all seen these videos. And they were saying, this is how you do a triangle. And they were going and they put a triangle on, or they put an armbar on, or they'd show a guard pass or whatever. And it just didn't make any sense to me, because I didn't think the average viewer, the way we viewed fighting, or the reason that it was so exciting, that the average viewer needed to know how to do a triangle. But the average viewer needed to know was how to watch a triangle. So that little group of people, we were like, we gotta, and Lawrence called it the analysis movement. And to be honest with you, and not to toot the horns of those three or myself by any means, and the same stuff was being done everywhere at the Fox desk. And I know people don't watch history, they don't watch changes, and they don't for the most part, give a shit. And when they hear somebody like me telling some history there, oh, you're tooting Jack Slack's horn, or you're tooting your own horn, or you guys are taking credit. I am trying to do that. I'm literally trying to show how these things move in paths. It's very normal. It happens at everything. Nobody deserves credit for anything. This is a normal occurrence. But yes, even the desk was like, where do you think they are on the division? And the reason these rituals start is because they're reproducible. So a very good producer and director of a television program will go to the desk and go, okay, guys, when we come back, let's talk about where this sits in the rankings. And after the commercial, let's talk about what's next for each guy. Because producer's job is to create some type of continuity. It's something that's reproducible and something that doesn't have any turbulence or unknown. If we know the audience likes this, we're going to do this. So that's what was happening. Then, Lawrence and Jack, and, Lawrence to a great degree he's so passionate about the techniques of fighting, the technical skills. He was like, we got to create an analyst movement. And, we made posts at the time, and a few other people did it. A year or two after that, Dan came, and he was doing great ones with John Gooden, who was also fantastic. Those guys are really good. They care, and Dan's so smart, and he's such a good communicator. But the goal, if all you do is then make breakdowns a thing, and a breakdown is like, all right, guys, we're going to look at this thing. There's these two fighters, and what are the things each guy has to do to be able to win this fight? Well, this guy's got to throw a lot of leg kicks. And then, if he does that, this guy's got to get the takedown. And that becomes a thing. That's the breakdown. Then we've done no better than what came before, which did no better than what came before. You become an established idea, a ritualistic ceremony of, here are the two guys. Here's the three things they need to do. What'll happen if this? Here's some of their last fights. Look, if you step out here, here's a red arrow that shows that thing. And we've been doing that for years now. And it's cool that we do that. And I'm way more happy that people are interested. And they are. I watch what's out there. People who would click on, one of BJJ Scout's videos 4 years ago would be the smart people. Now they're the every people. Now they're the everybody. They want to see what's happening within these fights. But the intent was never now make it this and make it this forever. The intent was along the step of us evolving. Like, what the fuck are we watching fights for? They're beautiful and they're brilliant and they're interesting, but they're not just technical. They're not just step to B, pivot to X, throw a left hook, drop your head and step out and throw a low kick on the exit. Because that's just equally as dry and equally as just sort of small-minded. Fights are not that. Fights are emotional. Fights are complex. Fights are strategic. Fights are about, and the biggest flaw with that breakdown, and that's why I feel we have to grow out of it. I've tried to grow out of it. Dan and the best are already onto a new level, but is because these people change. If you say, oh, well, with the Diaz brothers, they're heavy on their front legs, so you got to throw a lot of leg kicks. Well, you think that's permanent? You think that's the God-given attributes of the Diaz brothers, that forever and 100 years they will be heavy on their front legs, so you leg kick them? If you do that, you'll automatically win. Then why the fuck does anybody lose to a Diaz? It's not true. If you know it by now, and you're somebody who watches fights 4 or 5 hours a week, these guys who have dedicated a lifetime to it, and their coaches know it as well. So there's a slow shift of being able to move their weight forward and back. They don't change it all right away, or they'll lose all their positive attributes too. They built an entire style around it. The reason they didn't change it for the lengths of time that they didn't was because it worked. It couldn't be stopped. An answer was found, so they have to slowly adapt. They can't be totally weight distributed back, or they can't be moving in ways they didn't move, or all the advantages of pressure and aggression and heavy quantity of punches, and that would all be lost. So they change. But when you do the old school, the old style breakdown, it doesn't factor in the truth. And the truth is the Diaz brothers are not heavy on the front leg. The truth is this guy is not left-hand reliant. The truth is Alistair Overeem doesn't always move to his left. These are things we say if we're making a breakdown the way that was relevant 4 years ago. So now, if the goal is not, I want my chance to say knockout power in both hands. And if that is your goal, good on you. Go do it. Go enjoy yourself. But my goal is to go further, uncover more truths. Become dumb again. Find things that I don't understand. Make everything we've done over the last 4 or 5 years completely wrong because we're missing so much information. What's going on psychologically? What's going on emotionally? How does the strategy deteriorate? What are the real energy systems that are being used? What really is lactic acid and how and why does it work? What happens when a brain has been hit a number of times? How do you psychologically discourage somebody? All of these things, to me, are what needs to be broken down. A breakdown, and this is, again, and I don't mean to be arrogant, but we were the guys who were on the front end, 10%, 20%, whatever. Don't tell us, and people do this. That's not a breakdown. A breakdown is going to be whatever the next people want it to be. In fact, it's funny you mention that. I've been sitting the last couple of weeks and trying to get away from using that word at all. Because now that word doesn't actually, it's either has too narrow a meaning you can only say slip the head and come back with the right hand. Here's a circle around a thing. Watch his hips do this. Or it has no meaning at all, where people are calling anything a breakdown. And somebody will, have an hour-long podcast where they talk about the rankings and they'll call it a breakdown. Or somebody will say, oh, this is my breakdown, and all they're showing you is stuff you can get on Wikipedia. So it has either, and that's a problem with language, which is why you have to study language if you want to try to improve the ability to communicate. So I'm trying to get away from that word at all, if possible. Because it either means too much or not enough, but no matter how you look at it, it's a convoluted term. So, and that term shouldn't be there forever either. No term should. For some reason, from the start of time, we called something the tail of the tape. I don't know when that was used. Somebody came up with that term. It hasn't been around forever. One person went on a podcast or on some kind of thing on television or the radio or whatever and said, and here it is, the tail of the tape. And the rest of us said, I guess we got the term that we need for the rest of time. We can't and shouldn't do that. Language is not permanent. If it becomes permanent, we outgrow our language. So, and that is why, I'm sorry I meandered. It's been a real tendency of mine lately. I'm not sure why. I guess I'm trying to think a lot of these things out loud as a way. One of the beauties of a podcast is you can think them out loud, warts and all, good and bad of it, your own flaws in your own thinking, which I think people might like in some podcasts because they show that, hey, everybody else has flawed thinking as they try to work ideas out, and it makes you feel more normal. But we shouldn't be using this. Words should not be permanent. We outgrow them. We outthink them. And, am I going to call it Robin's Breakdown? Yeah, probably for a few more months, maybe even longer. But eventually I want to find a way to outgrow that because the S pattern of growth goes up and the top of the S flattens and you stop growing, and then every breakdown will be the same for the next 5 years, and 1,000 people will do them, so they'll become commoditized and no one will have any interest, and then you have to do something else. And so the bottom of the next S is lower than the top of that S, and you start with something new and exciting. And I guess that's why I'm trying to do this Ask Robin Black and see what else is out there. Fighting is not binary. It's not step into range 2, land a left hook, move your head and get out. Fighting is emotional and it's scary and it's painful and it's beautiful and it's all those things. So technical breakdowns to me feel very very 2015, to be honest with you. So that's why I'm trying to find ways to make them different. People don't always like them. In fact, they often hate them. But I'm going to have to be okay with that because I want it to go further and I want to dig deeper and I want to be challenged and I want to fail, try something risky and fail at it because I think in the long run it will make me better and I'll be more excited to do my thing.
And I think the fans really do appreciate that. When it comes to being an analyst, I think you have to have intimate knowledge of the sport. You have to really understand combat sports. But then, as you mentioned, you also have to have great communication skills. Just the knowledge itself would be worthless because you wouldn't be able to explain it to somebody else. I think the reason why people relate to you so well is because you also add a touch of humility to it. And I'm pretty sure I've heard you say this before on one of your podcasts, and it was something that I found really striking. And it was that when you do this, it's not about showing off what you know. It's only about picking up the overall knowledge for everyone, all of our fans. And you could see how, as you mentioned, as the analyst game, I guess, if you want to call it that, has evolved, so too has the color commentary. And we've had Joe Rogan do the play-by-play for the UFC for so long, and it's almost like it's kind of crazy to think about the UFC post Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan, in many ways, was kind of like your best buddy that just knew a lot about the UFC, and he would be able to explain things to you in a way that you, without as much knowledge about MMA, you could understand it and enjoy what you were seeing. But then we see Brian Stant come on there, and when he does the color, and he does an excellent job, but it's different. It's to the point where the fans have gotten to the point where they understand what an armbar is. They understand why people would do this. And you don't have to explain it the way Joe did. You don't have to say, oh yeah, right here you want to move your hips like this or do that. It's just, oh, this is what he's doing right here, and you understand why he's doing that because you're a fan of the sport. So it's kind of cool to see that, like, not just you as an analyst that you've evolved, but like I think the fans too. Just the basic knowledge of MMA, I feel like among most fans has risen so much just within the last few years.
Well, you know what the really cool thing about, and this is true of you having a podcast, and this is true of Brian having a huge role like this, and this is true of anything that you're doing, is if you're talking about something that you're interested in, and people are somewhat interested in, and maybe they're curious and want to see it, hear it, whatever, is you're kind of you have the opportunity and the responsibility as a thought leader. So, when you push an idea or you're passionately like so sure that this idea is good or people need to know it, you're a thought leader there. And this isn't just Brian Stant or a podcast. This is every day, all the time, everywhere that people go. Everything that you say influences people around you. Everything that the way you interact with people influences people around you. It's just the truth. Get in a cab, be really polite to that cab driver and thank him so much and be sincere and listen to him and hear his stories and get an idea. You leave with his story wherever you go and that great interaction, which you'll carry to your next one. And the next guy who gets in his car can be affected by your great interaction with him. Now, of course, if that's Joe or that's Brian, Joe's podcast can be listened to by millions of people. So Joe has this weird responsibility to pass good ideas and good information and good vibes. And there's something about that in where I feel like maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe I just am seeing what I want to see, but I'm seeing more of that. Like I'm seeing people feel that there's good ideas out there to share, and that the world of podcasting and the world of broadcasting takes some people who have this real positive vibe. Maybe you don't get to a level of a Joe or a Brian where you can pass that much information unless you had put some positivity there. I mean, you mentioned humility earlier, and I appreciate you saying that. But I really feel like one of the things and I'm always trying to work on things, is to make sure to not ever be affected by people saying positive things, too much positive things about me. If somebody sends me a compliment, I will acknowledge it and thank them. It's a kind thing to do, but I can't let that thing make me believe I'm really good at something, because the whole thing works. That idea of waking up tomorrow and growing your thing, whatever your thing is, revolves around that really brand new mindset, that child's vision, where children are just, you show them something, they want to taste it, they want to grab it, they want to smell it, they want to see if it fits in their ear, they want to like put two of them together, they want to smash it. That you have to have that mindset. And if anybody tells you you're great, or as worst of all, if you start believing you're great, you start thinking you know something special, or you're motivated by, results. Oh, people, whenever I do this, I get 1 million clicks. I'm going to do more of this. You're fucked. You're fucked. You're absolutely fucked. If you don't know what your true why is, like your true why am I doing this? Who am I and why am I doing this? If the answer is, I love it when people say, you're great, your podcast is great, or, they click your interview 1 million times, you're just going to move towards that result. You're going to lose your why. And your why is what keeps you going. Your why is what keeps you authentic. Your why is what makes you you and that gives you the chance that you'll be way better in 4 months and way better in 6 months. The biggest goal that everybody should have, and if you have it, you're set, is that you just want to be better every week, month, and year. That's it. All you want to do, whatever it is you do, and it doesn't even have to be a job or an art or a hobby. It can be being a dad or going to the gym or eating or, knowing something about anything, is I want to be better at it in a week, in a month, in an hour than I was before. If you do that, you're set for life. Your whole life only improves all the time. And that default doesn't work if every time somebody sends you on Twitter and says, bro, I love your breakdown, you believe them or you soak that in too much. It's kind of someone to say that, but you cannot let it affect you. You have to be a beginner. You have to look at it as a beginner. I'm thrilled if somebody thinks that I did something great, but I think I'm a white belt in it. And that's really important. If you can just develop that perspective, you'll always get better.
Yeah, staying humble, staying hungry.
Yeah.
I'd love to transition over, talk a little bit about this big UFC pay-per-view card that we have coming up this weekend, specifically the two co-main events between Dominic Cruz, Cody Garbrandt, and Amanda Nunes, and the return of Ronda Rousey. There was another fight on that card that I was really excited about, Cain Velasquez versus Fabricio Werdum. Let's begin with that bad news. We're once again robbed of another Cain Velasquez fight. I feel like that happens all the time. Mm-hmm. Or should I say, we are robbed once again by a fight from somebody from AKA. In fact, Luke Rockhold, Daniel Cormier, and Cain Velasquez right now are dealing with some injuries and have postponed fights. I want to pick your brain about this. Does someone need to go over to the staff and management there and say, hey, look, we need to change the way we're training?
I don't think so. Honestly, I think if you look at everything, just hold your left hand and your right hand up in front of you and just alternate. One goes up, one goes down, just 4 or 5 inches up and down, up and down. And then start hard on your left and do that across your face and over to your right, just up and down, up and down. And so if we take the moment of right now and say, what's the story on these guys? I mean, Rob Black, how can you be so stupid? If they're out, obviously they can't train that hard. They all won with that very same system. The very same system that is currently failing them made them all champions. You alter, and this is the real thing, man. Everything is alchemy of something. Everything is an alchemy of multiple things. Everything. Who you are relates to what you learned as a child, what you trained, how your health was, what you felt like when you woke up, how much sleep you got last night, what you ate. Everything affects what you are right now. And everything a fighter is, everything an athlete is, everything a human being is shaped by everything. And if you change anything, so picture it as a chili. You don't put hot sauce in the chili. It's not just chili without hot sauce. It's not the same chili. Everything about it is different. You take the same chili and you don't put beans in it. Everything about it is there. How's your chili? It's okay. How's your chili? Is this championship level chili? It's okay. I don't mind it. It's pretty good. Like the alchemy that created the belts that those guys have on their wall includes the work that they did. Work itself has 50 influences or 100 or thousands if you take the result of the work plus the result of that result, etc. So we say they got to spar less. everything is different. They're probably not champions. They may be different in every way, because the hard work, the striving to get through that round and doing it the highest level of almost fighting that much changes you forever. It changes you tomorrow. It changes the way you go after your strength and conditioning. Surviving around with Cain Velasquez that you would never have got to taste, or 2 of them, or 5 of them, or a week's worth of them, that injures your knee pretty bad, but not enough that you miss that fight against Daniel Cormier or against Anthony Johnson. All of that. It's an alchemy. It's a chili. It's a soup, a stew. It's whatever. Change any ingredient, you change everything. So if they spar less, there's a very good chance they are not champions. If they spar with less intensity, there's a very good chance they're not champions. It's an alchemy of all things involved, including and maybe especially the intensity of that sparring. So your left hand is that sparring. It goes up. And the right hand, and now, unfortunately, we need 3 hands for this. This is my flaw. Imagine you have a further right hand. Your left hand goes up. That's our sparring. Our right hand goes up. That's our championship. We win. And then that far right hand goes up, and that's injuries. And it stays there. It stays there now. And now you raise the intensity even higher, and the injury goes up even higher. Championship goes up too. It all keeps going up until one day the injuries surpass your ability to work hard, your hard sparring, and your ability to win championships. Now, what do? The truth is, what they probably do is what you can do is recreate everything, because, and this is a saying I've used a lot and I've passed around a lot. It's not my saying. It's Leonardo DiCaprio's. But at every stage of your life, every level that you go up will require a new you. And with that new you will be a new strategy and a new plan and a new structure. And that structure will not be do everything you do the same, but spar with less intensity. It just won't. It just will not. It'll change everything. It'll affect their thinking. It'll affect the way they drive through moments of pain. It'll affect their ability to put in one more training session. It'll affect all those things. You can't change only that. You must change everything. And they need an overhaul of everything. Thought process. Who's the new us now? So that we're at a new level. We need a new us. Who is that? Well, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not equipped, and I'm not 100. It will, to make a new them will require a new system and new coaching thinking. And what's his name? Their coach. He escapes me. I can picture his face, and I sometimes have a problem with names. Anyways,
Javier Mendez.
Yes, Javier Mendez, of course. Javier Mendez will need a new line of thinking. They're wrestling coaches. They're the people who structure everything. What you can't do is just spar less hard. We need to restructure everything. How we rest, how we think, how we overcome what we gained mentally by those hard rounds. What's going to replace that mental challenge? What's going to replace that mental overcoming? So all that has to happen. And it's not an issue of the easy answer is usually the wrong answer. The low-hanging fruit, the answer that, and I do not mean to be critical, so please don't misunderstand me, but the answer that a 19-year-old who doesn't study martial arts, who really likes fighting and watches almost every card, but is studying, chemistry in university and dating 3 or 4 different girls and on Tinder and having other hobbies, the answer that he can come up with is not almost ever the right answer. And so the knee-jerk answer is often the ones we go with. It's often the one that the narrative carries. It's why breakdowns you have certain expectations of what you think a breakdown should be. We should talk about leg kicks. We should talk about et cetera, et cetera. But it's usually not the one that's going to push the envelope and create more learning and create more debate and create more thinking and create ultimately more meaning and attachment to fighting. But sorry I took the long route on that, but we have time, and the long route is generally the right one. And we live in a society, because we're so busy and we have so many interests and we so want the answer quick that you usually can't get to it in a soundbite. But it's usually the case. I talk about, and we'll talk about this. You're going to mention Cruz and Ronda. the never ending, the motivating, the anchor to every conversation going forward to me is that everything that you come up with in a conversation that isn't pushing the thought that these guys are different and we don't know what they are is all bullshit. So, and I had somebody send me a message on Twitter or DM me, a friend, and I was saying, you cannot say the left hand, he needs to throw the left hand because this guy knows it, and according to his reaction to his belief that you're going to throw the left hand will change how he plays it. And if he plays it and his coach played in a certain way that they're counting on your left hand so he can slip and throw his right, you and your coach will detect that minutes into a fight. Therefore, he just needs to get behind the jab more, total bullshit. And I was talking about that on a podcast, and a friend who loves fighting, messaged me, and he goes, according to what you're saying here, all breakdowns are bullshit. And I'm like, well, they are. all breakdowns are bullshit. All breakdowns are bullshit because they carry, usually you're seeing it after the fact. And I don't know how many fighters you have to talk to where they're like, actually, no, I didn't do that at all. That was a fluke. I didn't see that opening. Like, it's just, we're creating a story, and that's cool. Creating stories is cool. It opens up other lines of thought. It opens up other perspectives. There's nuggets of truth in it. It gives you big principle ideas. Storytelling helps take people places. Analogies help you understand something on a deeper level. There's lots of value in doing these types of breakdowns, but after you do them for enough years, they'll get you to is, well, actually, I don't know what's happening there because I don't know how he was breathing. Well, I won't know how he was breathing until I study how you breathe. Oh, wait, Dom breathes different. Why does he breathe that way? Oh, it's related to the way he uses his anaerobic energy system. Oh, why does he do that? Hey, wait a second. To change direction like that, we can call it whatever we want to call it. It's a language. Oh, I call it the dart. Well, that doesn't mean anything. I know that if I see Barney the dinosaur and a kid goes, yeah, it's Barney the dinosaur, they're right. That's recognition. We can recognize that anytime somebody draws you in and sprints off the line, we could call it whatever we want. But if we don't know what, why, and how, it's really just, we're really just saying that guy hit the ball, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And there's a lot of value in that. But in the long run, we live in a society where people don't want to play video games. They want to play simulations.
Yeah.
And that's who's consuming everything. And people who are consuming things from the point of view of wanting a simulation, those are the same people who really want to know. They'll settle for he checked the low kick. But what they want in the obsessives, and over time, almost every category of things have only obsessives. Yeah, when Ronda fights this weekend, there'll be 1 million extra people watching. That's pretty cool. But really, it's the other 400,000 who you're talking to when you're pushing the envelope of understanding and knowledge and beauty of martial arts. And and again, if we get into those fights, and we've still got at least 40 minutes, we get into those fights, the primary truth of those fights is how little we understand. And the more you know, the more you learn and the more you study, the less certain all of these things become. And what that does is it forces you to find new truths about it. And that's the journey that I'm on. And that's the journey that, I may not have the most people traveling with me on this journey. I might only have a specific type of real fight nerd with me, but those are the ones I want. I want people who want to go on that journey.
It's a very precarious practice, the art of the breakdown, because you're trying to project what you've seen someone do in the past, and then you have to project how much they've improved, which is that's nearly impossible to do.
Yeah.
And then you have to also then compensate for the fact that these are humans, not robots that are going in there. So, maybe the guy does have a physical advantage. He does have the natural reach advantage, but he still has to use it.
That's right.
And what happens the first time he gets hit in the face?
You're exactly right. And it is exactly. You get hit in the face once if you're retreating, or if you're, if you don't throw the jab because last time you did, you got countered twice and now it hurts your nose and you're a normal human being who reacts that way. It all becomes kind of meaningless. But so what it leads you to is further truth, deeper and deeper truth, because, well, we can't project how much they improved, but if you really are studying and if you're really paying attention to their coaches, the journey that their coaches are on, the journey that they're on, what information, you make some real educated guesses. And I'm happy, I'll talk, hey, and after, and often I do a lot of my study and research not on camera, not recorded. Hey, were you guys working on this thing? Yes. Well, now I got some insight. I was correct guessing what they worked on. Now, if I'm guessing that, and the very big one is the very first thing, if you look at it as a young, when audiences are looking at it and trying to go, oh man, and they do it a lot with the fighters that they love. And I know they do it a lot in Ireland with Conor, because there's been a lot of breakdowns of Conor and a lot of, really, and he's very special. And they're like, oh man, if he can just get that left hand going here, and he's got to make sure he's on the back foot. And it's all just terms that people have often heard. But most of those, if you're, a 20-year-old guy with a very full life who watches fights 3 or 4 hours a week, and you date and you have hobbies and you play a video game and you're learning about something and you go to university and you have a part-time job, whatever you think is the right thing to do or might be the right way to attack that other fighter is the starting point. That is not the truth. That is not the finish. It's the start. So it's the start of a staircase of where the thinking must go now. So, okay, I think he's got to really make sure that he slips back and throws his left hand. Now, if you're right, and there's a good chance that you're not in step one, but if you are, you must assume that a very educated coach who spent 30 years or 20 years working, who knows his fighter inside and out, knows his fighter's capability, immediately is like, well, Conor McGregor might look to do this. If I was trying to beat my fighter using Conor McGregor, I would work on these aspects. Okay, cool. Now we must make some assumption. We're not the full commitment to it, but some assumption that Coach Kavanaugh will use some of that. Mm-hmm. So we must prepare for that. So if Conor, so let's say I've got Eddie Alvarez, I'm Mark Henry. Well, if I was Kavanaugh and McGregor, I would plan to beat Eddie with A, B, and C. Okay, I better plan for A, B, and C. Now Kavanaugh we'll be looking at, and this is a lot of just aspects of game theory and chess and real basic sort of rules of engagement in military thinking, is if that's true, then Kavanaugh will look and go, okay, well, he may be assuming we're doing X, Y, and Z. The way that if I was preparing Eddie, I might work with that is Do, Re, and Me. Then I'm going to add, ZXY, you know what I mean? And you push and pull through some of these potentialities. Or you do what Matt Hume does and is just like, we're going to build you to such a level that your ability to express in every single position, we have answers for every single option. And we have 2 of them. And whichever one we choose, you have 2 or 3 reactions, and whichever one you choose is always wrong, and we take you deeper and deeper and deeper in there. And so those different strategies, one day Greg Jackson's strategy of training and of building a fighter will meet with Matt Hume's strategy and how will those things play out. And that's what we got to look at. Wrestler versus boxer, by all means, chat about that as a fan and because you love fighting and because that'll maybe make you think about it further, or maybe you don't want to. Because people are just like, oh, it's just in whatever sport. They're like, oh, man, they got to play a zone defense. Fucking rights. Cool. But I understand it's a lot deeper going on there. And yelling at your favorite players to just stick with zone defense doesn't work. All of this is what makes it interesting, eternally curious,
Yeah, and if it were that simple, fights would always happen the way we talked about it before. The Eddie Alvarez Conor McGregor fight is an excellent example of that, because Eddie Alvarez he's an elite fighter, just a veteran of the sport. And to a casual fan watching that fight, it seemed like he made so many mistakes that A guy of his caliber shouldn't be making, or at least what seems like mistakes. But that's what happens when you get in there and you fight a guy like Conor McGregor. You start making decisions that you didn't make before, even in your previous fights.
Yeah, McGregor is really operating on some levels that are hard to comprehend for people, even until they get in there with him. And the thing about, you got to understand relativity. So people looked at that guy beat Sage Northcutt. Again, I'm doing with the people like, how the fuck can
the
you
guy
not
that
remember?
The guy that just beat Sage Northcutt, Mickey Gall.
Yeah, Mickey Gall. And people are like, how can you not remember Mickey Gall's name? It's just a block I get sometimes. I don't know. I can picture he looks like a Disney hero. I know exactly how he beat CM Punk. I know what he said after. I just forget his name briefly. It's a weird name thing. And I don't know if it does have to do with taking kicks to the head. I have no idea, but it happens to me. The guys at work on the desk, and Ramdeen, when I work with him, they sense when I have it. So as soon as I say, and then I'll motion with a chain and howling, and Rampage Jackson, like they know, and they help me out a lot. They're good friends, but it does happen. But people will see that fight and they'll be like, Mickey Gall can beat Dan Hardy. It's like, you lost your mind. But you can't expect, again, somebody who watches fights on the weekend because they love fights to understand the relativity of skill between Mickey Gall and Dan Hardy. So there's a real sort of critical overtone and undertone that happens when people talk about fighting now that I'm trying my best to teach myself to never experience. I bought a stereo, a record player, and man, like I know nothing about it. I don't know how to plug cords in the back of things. Like I don't know I don't know how adapters work, a splitter, like all that kind of shit. And I go in there, and the guy's he was so kind and he was so helpful. And I said, man, I can't thank you enough. And he goes, what do you do? And I said, I talk about fights on TV. And he goes, well, you're so busy doing that. How would you know anything about a record player? And I just thought that was such a good lesson for me, and it was such a good thing that I will try my best to pass around and make people. I love it when people fight over on Twitter over whether McGregor sucks or rules, but it's there's a real negativity to that level of criticism. So a part of me is like, are you guys crazy? Like, how can you think Mickey Gall? But why would a guy who sells record players and studies record players and studies music and has a collection of records that 10,000 of them, and knows all about record history and understands how the machines work and knows how the Bluetooth connects the thing to this and gold wiring, all that shit. Why would that guy understand the relationship between the skills of Mickey Gall and Dan Hardy? He shouldn't understand that. That's what I'm here for, So if I'm a dick about that, then I'm really just a dick in general. So I'm trying to get away from that. I'm hoping other people kind of, again, we're talking, if you're lucky, you can influence people. And if you have something positive, I'm hoping people get away from being this sort of negativity and gossip of, this guy said this, but this guy said this. And did you hear what Dom said about that guy? And I understand Cruz and Garbrandt are using verbal warfare, and I understand that's a part of the game, but our incessant obsession with it, I don't think shares beauty or encourages knowledge or encourages self-growth. I think negativity spawns negativity. People hate Ronda Rousey. They can say, well, it's because of all the bad shit she said about Misha. But if saying bad shit is so fundamentally flawed and it makes you a bad person, then why are you saying it? Why are you saying it about her? And their answer would be like, well, she brought it on herself. Well, she thinks that Misha did. She's wrong. Just like you're wrong. Everybody thinks somebody else started it. Everybody thinks negativity started with the other guys. Every war that has lasted forever, they think of the Bloods and the Crips, or the Northern Irish, or the Protestants and the Catholics, or anything. They all think the other one did it, but in the end, you're just mad. You're just mad. Ronda, if you hate Ronda and you say terrible things about her and you tweet terrible things about her and you go on YouTube angrily to say what a terrible person she is, and I ask you why you do it, you'll say, because she's a terrible person. Well, how do you know? Well, she said horrible things about someone else. but you're doing that. If it's so bad of her to do it, why does it make you do it? You know, I don't understand that. So same thing. I'm trying to take the lesson that this record player taught, this record expert taught me, and make it welcoming. You know, welcome people into the idea that styles make fights, even though that's from 1999. That is an old dated concept. But if you start with that, maybe you'll look at little sub styles. Maybe you'll look at little micro moments of style, and maybe you'll come to the idea of no style, and and it's good. And that guy was so kind about that record player, and it was such an obvious lesson to me about how to share fighting, or anything. But I don't know how the fuck I ended up over there on that story. But that is what I've been doing with the podcast, and I guess that muscle is what's being used now, that train of thought muscle, and it's very fun. But I think at some points there's got to be a too far, and I'm discovering where that is.
Do you think that was a weird call out by Mickey Gall, Dan Hardy?
Yeah, but again, like I'll repeat this a lot, I think, on my podcast for the next while. But before I say to that. I feel like, and I can't state this enough, and it is not with judgment, and I talked about this a week or two ago, but there are 3 languages I think that exist, and the very first one is the one used most in society, and it is nobody's fault. We were trained to do it, and our parents did it, and their parents did it, and society's done it, and Donald Trump did it, and Hillary did it, and their supporters did it, and everybody did it. It's the language of gossip. Expressing an opinion of some level on something that you just are watching. Oh my God, I can't believe this guy said that. Oh God, did you hear what he said? And passing on of this sort of these distractions of emotional information. And the second language, after you see it and you think to yourself, this might be harmful. Hey, wait a second. The election was of a great country was at least in part influenced by this guy said this about this news reporter, and emails, and this guy said this about this, but that's not really possible because it costs this, but she did this. That influenced the entire country. We ended up there from gossip. We ended up there from our tendency to gossip, our having so much success as a nation. We're your neighbor. I'm in Canada. We're basically the same thing. We're like your goofy little brother. We went there. And so once you start to see that, maybe that is, it reinforces, she's fat, this guy's stupid. All those things, they're not all that. Yes, Trump did a little of that. And, I guess, I'm sure plenty of Democrats did plenty of that too. It's not a one side or another side kind of thing. But it's everywhere. It hasn't always been everywhere, and it doesn't always have to be everywhere. And once you think about that, the second language is the language of the warrior, which is where you're in a state of trying to fight that within yourself. You're sitting there saying to yourself, hey, maybe this is bad. Maybe this isn't just this guy called this guy this name, but culturally and societally and systemically bad for us as people. And, and I got this concept from a book called the 4 Agreements. And it talks about language and how language took shape, and how when you're a child and you don't use language, you eventually need language, and it has limitations, and a lot of terms and ideas that we share and laws and even the letters of the alphabet are just agreements. Just agreed, that's an A. We just agreed if you put it together with an N, that's an, and that means something. That's all just agreements. It doesn't reflect our thinking. And anyway, so once you get to that point, the language of the warrior is you're in a stage in your life where you're hoping to not do that yourself. You're still going to do it. I do it, and I feel bad when I do it. And you should feel bad when you do it if you think about it. And then get to a point where you don't want to spread it all the time. And you start judging others for doing it because it's not their fault. Their parents did it, and their parents did it, and their leaders did it, and their teachers did it, and their friends did it, and everyone did it. It's bad, but we all did it. But you can't judge people because it's not their fault. It's just the way it went. And if you ever pass the language of the warrior, and I'm nowhere barely in there, I'm still working on trying to not do that. If you ever do, you get to the language of truth, which is you are speaking truth of emotion and truth of free ideas and truth of meaning. Because And the book is a quick read, but it's a very, very fascinating read about language and what it means and where it comes from and how we think. And it's very, very good. The 4 agreements. But anyway, so the reason I backed up all of that talk about gossip is, in the end, whether, Mickey Gall says, I want to fight that guy, the call out, it's part of the job. It's been shaped. Chael Sonnen, who is, a powerful influencer, and he uses the power of gossip, and it's no judgment. I adore Chael. I adore him. It's just where he's at in his path. So he said, everybody needs to call out someone on the mic. Young Mickey Gall saw that and does it. He grows up with that influence. And Dan, now my opinion on what Dan should do or could do and what he should do and if it's right is gossip. It is. My opinion of that is gossip, especially if I judge him for it. He doesn't know. He's young. He's coming along, and he's developing at a period where he's not at a period to be able to compare his skills and where his skills will be. If he's like 23 or 24, he may even be younger. And at that stage, it's impossible to imagine what growth will shape you to at 30. And if he could imagine how good he could conceivably be at 30, he'd be like, that guy could fight Dan Hardy. I bet that guy could really have a really great battle with Dan Hardy. Now, if he thinks a step further, and that is 8 years away, well, Dan, who's highly evolved and evolving at a higher level every day as a human and as a fighter and as a martial artist, Dan will evolve in that time too. Dan will grow. So once you start looking at life that way, who he called out and who he didn't call out and whatever, I love the way Dan didn't judge him for it. In fact, Dan was complimentary. He didn't need to say, I don't want to knock off a future contender, because if we look strictly at evidence, just evidence, nothing else, no judgment, no emotion, no nothing, there is no evidence that this young man will be a future contender. There's none. He's fought very, very low-level people. And there are thousands of very good, very well-spoken, very comfortable fighters, thousands on the lower levels right now that also have beaten people at that level and have shown promise in doing so. So those thousands will not all be contenders. And I mean thousands. It's real. Worldwide, there are 1,000 great fighters that are not yet in the UFC. That's crazy, but you got 10 in Edmonton, just Canada, and you got 12 in Toronto. You've got another 40 across Canada. We can get to 100 in Canada. And America has 10 times the population. They all have the skill level in Mickey Gall. So far, Mickey Gall will grow and evolve and get better as long as ego doesn't get in his way. So if he thought that way, he would be different. But he's young. He's just a young guy. He's a young guy who is currently feeling the enjoyment of being adored and being hit up on Facebook and having people tell him he's awesome and stuff. That can be a very dangerous thing. It can be a very dangerous thing. But he can also go back to the why again. Go back to the who and the why. Who is he and why is he doing this? He's not doing this to get retweets. He's not doing this to keep his name in the paper. He's doing this to become a world champion or to grow as a person, as a fighter, to enjoy fighting. That's why he's doing it. Mentioning Dan Hardy's name might be, because it's great to keep yourself in the conversation. And a young guy would feel that this necessary compulsion to stay there. It would feel like when it goes away, you're not sure, like, am I done? Like the daily reinforcement. I mean, why does Rihanna put pictures of herself up on Instagram with no top? Why does she? She doesn't need to. And again, this easily, I'm already into the territory of gossip, so I'm already failing on my mission. But this person, if we look at it again, try to look at it not as her, but why might some, millionaire, very successful recording artist put a picture of themselves with no shirt on Instagram? One possible answer is you just get in the habit of having this interaction with the public, and that you start to see it as a thing. You start to see it as a value or as a pay. And so you do it. So any of these reasons are reasons a young man might mention the name of an established, talented, high-level, evolved, hyper-intelligent mixed martial artist. And so when you look at it that way, it's like, it's not really that weird at all. when I was young, I did a lot stupider, crazier things than that. I was a lot less self-aware than he is. So, hey, good on him. This is all just growth for him. That's all just learning.
He's coming off back-to-back high-profile fights. You can say what you want to about his opponents. CM Punk, Sage Northcutt, those are big names. And those were hyped up fights. So I guess he just kind of wants to keep that hype train rolling too, keep booking those high profile fights.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. That if you were his close, educated confidant or a very, very high level coach, if you were Matt Hume working with him, if you were Dwayne Ludwig working with him, if you were a very close friend who's a good martial artist working with him, if you were a sports psychology consultant, you would be alarmed. You'd be, you know what, man? The goal is not the next biggest one, the next biggest one, the next biggest one, because eventually you're way too high and now we haven't grown enough. The goal is let's grow now. You've had 2 high profile ones. They've given you all kinds of intrinsic value of that kind of less important stuff like fame and success and notoriety. In the long run, we do need, you need those things, but you don't need them as much as, greatness of skill and ability to perform. And we need to have you fighting in fights that will increase that. That's what we need. That's what, if you are his life, his sports psychology consultant who's helping him focus on what's important. What's important is the long play. Are we going to be the world champion at 29? Because we got 7 years, man. In that time, notoriety will ebb and flow. It'll wane and it'll peak, and that's okay. In fact, that's good. It might be nice for you to have a quiet one now without all this pressure. Let's see what you can grow. Let's see how much, how big a strides you can make in your skill and in your knowledge and in you as a man. Let's do that. I'll bet you Greg Jackson would be like, okay, hey, we burned a little too hot, a little too fast, but that's okay. We can manage that. Let's give you a couple of smaller ones. Let's ask for, a headlining Fight Pass show against, another young guy. Yair Rodriguez might be in that similar situation as a young, but he's a little older, and he believes BJ Penn. There's some elements there. There's some elements that make sense. So, but that's everybody's own path to walk, and even that, maybe you would be his consultant, and you would try to make him see that the long play is happiness in life, and the long play is success down the road, and that it's better achieved by not taking this path. And he still might be like, I don't believe you, man. I can beat any of these guys. And he might have no interest in hearing that. And then if that's the case, he'll learn it his own way. And it's his path. It's not mine, and it's not his coaches, and it's sure not everybody on Twitter. And I really thought Dan Hardy's a good dude and a really smart guy and a great martial artist. I really thought the way he handled that was – I didn't watch it, and not any disrespect. Ariel's a friend. He really is. When I see him, we're happy to see each other. But – there is a large amount of gossip in that style of show. I'm not picking on him personally, but in that style of show. So I just can't watch it. It brings negativity to me, and not because of anything they did, but in my response to it. I respond poorly when I see a lot of talk about beefs and that kind of thing. So I just avoid it. But I did read a transcript of what Dan had said, and I thought it was very, very noble, and I thought it suited Dan very well.
Yes, a very, very classy response from Dan Hardy. And you think with Mickey Gall too, it could be the friction that comes between the management and the coaches. I don't know firsthand, but I would just think that there's got to be sort of some friction there between, when you chase a high profile fight, you're also chasing a bigger paycheck. And there may be some people that say that, hey, that's maybe where you want to go because that's what's going to get you the biggest paycheck. And then you have the other side of it. Why don't we just concentrate on you being the best fighter you can possibly be?
You make a really good point. You make the influences, the outside influences, the information that you get. Again, let's pick Cruz or Hardy. They can wade through that bullshit so fast. Yep. They know exactly where they're going. A guy like Anthony Johnson, they know, and they take a long time to connect with somebody and really trust them. Henry Hooft and Anthony Johnson are so well connected, and they know each other, and they care about each other, and they care about what's best, and that's true. But Young, the Foo Fighters, and I'm old. I just came up with the first old rock band I could come up with that people might know. They will not get tricked by any of that shit. But Bieber probably did a few years ago. And it's the same thing, Mickey Gall or Sage or any of these young ones. You come up, you're young, and you become a star, or at least to go from nowhere to 100,000 Twitter followers and people telling you you're great and seeing your name everywhere, and maybe your man cave or maybe your bedroom, depending on where you live, has posters of you from fights, and you've watched yourself on. It can change. It can affect you. And then there's all of these outside influences, and you've got to learn about all of them. Bring it back to McGregor one more time. McGregor figured out somehow, and they're all connected. They are. When you learn one thing, when you learn how to improve one thing, and how to manage one thing, and how to understand one thing, if you're smart and if you're leveling up your knowledge of self and your knowledge of the similarities between things, it raises all things. But McGregor learned how to become the level of fighter that he took out Aldo in 13 seconds and then took out one of the great lightweights ever, one of the most decorated great lightweights ever, in spectacular fashion, winning 2 belts. In that time, he with the right people, put together the Mac life, put together his own world of following him and creating and managing his own content. He put together 2 houses, training camps, raised his ability to understand different aspects, attributes, and skills in his body, like his use of energy. From the Diaz 1 to the Diaz 2, he studied his use of energy systems. Energy is a limited but renewable resource when used in a fight. So it's limited, meaning there are limits to how much you have. So we need to raise that limit slightly. It is renewable. So we need to raise its ability to renew. And we need to raise our ability to conserve that energy. 3 different ways so people, again, we go back. Oh man, that guy gasses so fast. That guy's got bad cardio. None of that shit is true. None of that about him or anyone else. It's overly simplified. If you just want to catch that fight on the weekend and you are pumped and you want to chat about the game just like any other game or sport with your buddies, you're like, oh man, Aaron Wood, man, guy's got a bad gas tank. Stephen Thompson, he's got good range management. If you want to do that, that's going to give you a lot of fun and a lot of the ability to engage and watch for something. And when you see it, you'll be thrilled. Like, it's awesome. But that guy has a bad gas tank. What does that really mean? Well, there are 3 energy systems, ATP, CP, anaerobic, and the aerobic system, and they're used differently. They're maintained differently. They recover differently. They work in tandem differently. McGregor learned all that between those fights to the point that he can up a flight of stairs and then do it in carrying something and then take a break and then go for a swim. And Kavanaugh will say, what's your heart rate out right now? And he'll tell you almost to 1 or 2 beats per minute. That he developed that level of self-awareness while learning about who to manage you, while understanding about, and he has looked at investing money and negotiated contracts with the UFC. When you look at all of this, when you look at that, if that guy can do that, and he's just a guy, he'll tell you firsthand, all he's doing is studying and spending his time with the purposeful increase of skills. That's it. That's what he does. And then making connections between those skills as to ways to level up other skills. And then finding ways to improve your ability to do more things properly and rest properly and all of that. That's all he did. And that's one of the great things you can take away from fighting. It's one of the things I'm studying for my Ask Robin Black podcast because people are really interested in it. And so all of that, you look at all that, then you look at a young fighter, they don't know about any of that. They know they have a killer right hand, and they know they can take a punch, and they know if they get your back, you might be in trouble, and they work really hard. And, hey, man, give me the next biggest fight because my agent says if we do, I might get a chance, doing a TV commercial selling tea. And it's like, if you don't know about all that shit, but you have to learn it. And you'll learn it any number of ways. You might have great mentors. You might find people you trust on them, gather more information, study all of these things. But you can't do it while watching yourself on TV. And so all that's the risk that a young fighter will face that, Matt Hughes never faced when he was fighting, or George St. Pierre never faced in the first 5 years of fighting. He faced it later. But he was prepared for it later.
You're talking about high-level athletes that have the mental fortitude to be able to wade through the crap, as you say. Dominic Cruz is that dude.
Yep.
He is
Yep.
one of those guys. And you mentioned it earlier, but he and Cody, just him and the entire alpha male
Yep.
camp, they always trash talk back and forth. It just seems like Dom is really good about getting under his opponent's skin. And I kind of liken him to Eminem's character in
Yep.
8 Mile,
Yep.
in that it's like before he did his final rap battle, he went up there and he actually said all the things he knew the other guy would say to insult him.
Yeah.
And
Brilliant.
he brought it all up. And Dom does that. He's like, all right, I get it. You're gonna say I have pillow fists, and like he brings up all the things that people criticize him or say are his weaknesses. And when he talks to you, it's you don't have anything to fire back at him because he's already accepted his own weaknesses. He's just calling attention to yours because he knows how to go at you. And he knows how to deal with his own weaknesses because he's faced them. He hasn't shied away from him, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it really you could just see it rattle some of these people. And not to say I don't think TJ Dillashaw is mentally weak. I don't think Cody Garbrandt is mentally weak. I just think when it comes to a battle of wits, I just think he's a step ahead of some of these guys. And when he said he had this brilliant line about how he was able to finance another house off of the bonuses that he's won off of,
Hmm.
and you just saw Cody. He just like, oh, houses, and he just like froze up. He was like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't have anything to say to that.
Yeah. Amazing. You're bang on in a number of areas. Including making a comparison to a character, because to a certain degree, Dom's playing a character. These are aspects, just like any great like character. And I mean, Eminem, that wasn't much of a stretch for him.
Yeah.
But this isn't all that much of a stretch for Dom. He's intelligent, he's funny, he's sarcastic, but it is an amplified character. But it's one you can't control. This will be my maybe. I can't promise, but it'd be like my last Conor comparison. But you brought up TJ Dillashaw is not mentally weak. No, he's not. You know who else is not mentally weak? Eddie fucking Alvarez.
Yeah.
Eddie fucking Alvarez is one of the mentally strongest guys in the world. And he was rattled. And he's like, I don't know, man. I was supposed to move to my left and wrestle a lot, and I moved to my right and boxed a lot. Hey,
Yeah.
why do you think that happened? This was an overt effort to make that happen by one of the best mental gamers in the game ever. And Dom is exactly the same way. Dom's playing a game. Now, the weird part about it is he end up getting two results from it, which is why more people will do it, which is why sadly it moves away from my talk about the three languages of humanity. But you get two values out of it. One is it worked. It will affect Garbrandt in many ways, and they're calculated. I'm actually talking to both guys on a phone call tomorrow at Fight Network, and I'm curious to ask about, like, think about this. Why does Garbrandt? What else does this fight mean to Garbrandt if he's telling the truth? If he's telling the truth, well, it's what would be a lie, judging by, and you want to make it true in the moment. You want this to be true, what I'm saying, but the moment of being frustrated and angry and passionate and emotional, it is not true. But you want it to be true that it is only about a contest. I believe I'm the better martial artist, and I will win, and I will have the best performance I have, and I believe that's enough to make me win. That's what it needs to be about. But you go in there, you're mad. He has all these triggers that he's placed that he can play with, say things in there now. And what does Dom want you to do? He wants you to run at him. He wants you to run straight at him. He wants you to be angry. He wants you to be overly aggressive. He wants you to be emotional. What you need to do to beat him is to be on your game, hyper-focused, sharp, and smart. And what undermines all of those things? Emotions, feeling the consequences. Consequences can include losing to a guy that you've had so much heat with, losing the title, losing your first fight ever, being proved that you're not that good. You can't have any of that shit. But he can try to bring that out with all the things he's done. So that's the beauty of it for me. That's where the elegance of language is happening. The negative for me is that rather than people, and you are definitely seeing the fascinating aspect of it, But the downside is that on first glance, it can just be, oh shit, did you hear what that boy said? Oh man, he clowned that bitch. Like that's negativity. That's sad. So both exist simultaneously in this case, and have at other times. And Muhammad Ali was one of the very first, and Chael did it to his own degree, and Conor does it, and Dom does it. It's been done dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds and hundreds of other times for many purposes. Get him to freeze, get him to overthink, get him to be angry, get him to be emotional, get him to be uncertain, get him to question himself. I mean, talking about somebody's concussions, that's some harsh shit. Like, that is some harsh shit. Because if it works, if it does nothing, well, nothing for you to do it. If it works and it makes him question himself or try too hard or not hard enough, I mean, that is some insidious stuff. The words are powerful. The words are powerful when used right, when strategized, when done from a place of understanding language and the implications of language. When done from, no, you're dumb. No, you're dumb. Like that doesn't do anything. that has no value. But it is fascinating, as much as it goes against the very nature of what is to me and what I personally, see as a societal negative. I understand if somebody is trying to knock me unconscious and change the path of my life. I understand that finding a way to use these negative things, you can easily make a case for yourself that they're valid and that you should use them.
The thing about Dom, and I think he really is truly one of my favorite fighters right now. And the thing that's so great about him is that it's like he's mastered the psychological warfare, but he's mastered it to the point where he doesn't need it, right? Like, he goes into it and it's like, all right, I probably have you beat there, but then, like, even when he's on Fox Stats, he's like, this is just for fun. Like, this is just entertainment. When we go in there, his goal should be to knock my head off. My goal is to knock his head off. None of that should even matter. So he doesn't even need it. That's just the incredible thing about Dom. I was saying how he seems to get under his opponent's skin. And one of the things I don't know if this is necessarily true, just the sense that I get, but I just feel like he should be much more popular than he is, just like how good he is and his place in the sport. He's one of a kind, historically good. And it doesn't seem like he gets, as Nate Diaz calls it, the push as maybe some of the other stars get. And my theory behind this is that when we look at Cruz and we look at his success, it makes us have to come to face with our own failures. This is a guy that came back from so much. He tells us he doesn't believe in ring rust, and then he goes out there and he proves it. He was on top of the world, a champion, and he lost it due to multiple devastating injuries and came back, and in my mind is one of the only few professional athletes that I can think of that managed to improve his game while dealing with major knee surgeries. Usually when the athlete comes back from a major surgery, you're just like, well, can they at least get back to where they were or something close? And somehow he managed to improve that. And when someone like that does that, it's easy to dismiss a John Jones because he's so physically gifted, or it's easy to maybe dismiss a BJ Penn because, he had that family support and he can kind of go and be a mixed martial artist without having to have a part-time job and the other things that some other mixed martial artists have to go through. But when a guy like Dominic Cruz does it, and he has all the excuses in the world not to succeed, and he succeeds anyways, it makes you look at yourself and go, whoa, everything that I did wrong, or everything that I failed at, I do have to take responsibility for it because this guy did and he succeeded. And I think that's a real tough thing for maybe some fans to face. And I guess if you look at it, he's not the strongest guy, he's not the fastest guy in the division. And really, if anything, Dominic Cruz, his talent, his real gift is that he seems to have this mental block that would stop other people from entering into situations that seem impossible to challenge. And he enters into those situations and he succeeds.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, a couple of things. I got only 15 minutes because I've got an appointment later, but I'm going to let's talk about this. So I might not get to talk about Ronda, but you know what? To me, as much as I am a fan of hers, to me, Dominic Cruz is a much more, I like the way you put it, historically remarkable, kind of historically in the world of fighting. This is so special. And he is so special. Will he be more appreciated one day after he's gone? He might, but I think history and how we view history changes. I think as a society, we value yesterday way less than we ever did. Everything is about the immediate. Everything's about the next novel experience. There is less and less value on history, and that happens as cultures succeed. It happened in Rome. People, one generation later didn't know who built the roads, kind of thing, and that is common. So I don't know if he'll be appreciated more. I don't know if he cares, and I think that's important because fame and popularity, you cannot control it. And I disagree with Nate Diaz, and I say this with all of the, whatever amount of whatever I need to be able to say that fucking to Nate Diaz, because I admire him. He's as special, maybe more so even, because of where he came from than a Dominic Cruz or Demetrius Johnson, both he and his brother. But these people are wrong when they say someone got the push or someone else didn't. I know that's counterintuitive. I know people will be like, what are you talking about? Look at all the commercials on Ronda Rousey or Conor McGregor. But you have to think about it. They didn't become big because they got commercials and they got television. They got commercials and they got those because they were stars. And people refuse to accept that because they like to think if they got what Ronda Rousey got, they would be a television star, or they would be on red carpets, or they would be there. It connects to what you were saying about Dom, but that is not true. The reason that the most educated minds in any industry, and I'm quoting this, choose to push something is because they're powerful and influential and enormous, and then compelling and unique and one in a million. And you fucking talk to Conor McGregor or Nate Diaz for that matter for 10 minutes and you know they're one in a million. And Nate Diaz does get a push. And Nate Diaz is fucking an immense star. But he also has that, more, need more, I want more, I'm hungry for more mentality. So he doesn't look around and go, hey, man, I'm a big star. He's like, yo, man. And part of being the underdog and being driven to take what he deserves is a part of his nature. So he has that. No matter how big he'll ever get, he'll still feel like he's been hard done by. And I think that's probably good. It's made him who he is. But you go and you put every dollar you put into Ronda Rousey into Amanda Nunes, and she will never be Ronda Rousey. And that's why when my buddy Joe, who I don't need to state how much I respect and admire and appreciate that man. But I saw him the other day and saying something about being baffled why they didn't, promote Amanda Nunes, the champ. But I mean, the answer to that is because it would be a waste of money. And I mean that with all the empathy and not being judgmental or cruel. But if you spent the Ronda Rousey money to promote Amanda Nunes, nobody would notice it. And I know what someone might think when they hear that, but I challenge you to tell me tell me about every car commercial you've seen on television and what car they are. And tell me about every coffee commercial you've seen on television and what coffee that is. And, and on and on and on. We're inundated with marketing and advertising and things desiring to make something else famous. And none of it ever works. You can't tell me what car commercial you just watched 5 minutes ago. And if we put Amanda Nunes on the thing 10 minutes from now, in a world where you've just consumed 700,000 impressions of marketing, I'll say, who was that woman's champion? You're like, I don't know, but she's fighting Ronda Rousey. And that's the truth. That's not a criticism. All of us, you take how many billion? I don't know, 5 or 6 billion, whatever. There's 8 billion, whatever people. There's only fucking 40 of them or 50 of them or 200 of them like that. And we don't know why it is, but it is. And Dom is not one of those. Dom is fascinating to you and I because we are fascinated by his brilliance. Making Dom into, a Kardashian will not work. And that's how we celebrate, and that's how we remember people, and that's what we do, is we go and we make them into big stars. And you can't make Amanda Nunes a star, and you can't make Dominic Cruz a star. And I don't think Dominic gives a shit. and neither do you, and neither do I, because Dominic Cruz, and the other thing you're absolutely right about is the biggest reason why you rebel against some of these people as sometimes is you have two options. You can look only two when you see a great success. And Dom, you outlined 5 or 6 of them in his life, one after the other, is you can say they're just like me, or they somehow have something I don't have, and or they were very lucky. And if you say they somehow have something I don't have and or very lucky, eventually you have envy and you have resentment, because that's not fucking fair. But if you look the other way and you say Dominic Cruz is me. Dominic Cruz 12 years ago or 15 years ago didn't know how to fight, didn't know how to talk on TV, didn't know how to play mind games, they didn't know how to be funny, they didn't know how to do any of these things. And he worked hard until he could do them. And if you admit that one, that's fucking a big, huge day in your life, the day you admit that one. You admit it. It's painful. It means you have to admit that everything you're doing and everywhere you are and everything is on you. And you have to admit that if you're going to grow. But it's a big fucking day the day you see that Dominic Cruz is just like you. Only he made choices and worked and didn't take no for an answer and strove. And it does get easier for him every time he succeeds like that, because it's further reinforcement that he can do whatever he sets his mind to. First, you want to fight, then you want to be a world champion, and then you want to come back from anything, and then you want to be the best analyst, and then you want to be the best mind, on and on. Everyone gets easier than the last. But it started with trial and failure and study and improvement and growth, and it carried on forever. And the day you admit that's true is a powerful day in your life. But if you don't admit that's true, then somehow this motherfucker has all this shit that you deserve. Because why does he have it and you shouldn't have it? That's really not fair, man. This guy gets everything. Besides, he's not that good. You know what? And hey, this mind game thing, and you just get in that spiral. And that spiral prevents you from admitting it. And there's a root of it I read somewhere. It's called imposter syndrome. By the way, the people who will ever see or hear or be responded to that somebody says it's driven by envy, the ones who respond the hardest with the most capitals and exclamation points are the ones that are the most envious, and the ones who deny it the strongest, because you don't want to admit that you're envious. So you create all these barriers and all of these chambers which dispel the fact that you're envious. No, it's because of this. No, because she said that. No, because that's. But really, you're envious. And then you just say, and it's easy to dislike someone then. But if you go the other way and you say everything is on me, every success and every failure is mine, and every failure teaches me something about how to be successful next time, your whole life fucking changes.
Yeah. Oh, that's an excellent point. And to your point about Ronda Rousey and how she is the star. Generally, the UFC, when they use a tag for one of their big pay-per-view fights, it's, we've only recently had women's MMA in the UFC anyways, but it's always typically been gender neutral, things like Bad Blood or Unstoppable. Yeah. But this one, UFC 207, is being marketed with a simple tag. She's back. And we're not referring to Amanda Nunes.
Yeah, so. Right. Yeah, it's true. It's true. But that is what it is. I mean, there, again, you look at... if you're looking for an explanation, it is because they're a company that fully understands that putting the money into Ronda Rousey will result in more profit, because that's how companies work. And if putting Amanda Nunes in the commercials would make them more profit, they would do that. And so they do it that way, because that's so ultimately. And don't misunderstand me that I somehow saying that this is good or that's fair or that's good justice. It's just the truth. So if you deal with the truth, you can figure out your place in it. How does this? If you think something should be fair, or God, life is so unfair. Every day, everywhere you go, everything. You're going to be met with millions of challenges and all kinds of things that are not the way that your sense of justice thinks they should be. So you can either freak out every single time it happens, it is a strategy. It's not one I would recommend. You're not going to have a very happy life. Or you can acknowledge that is so, and then we'll figure out how to work within that to the best of your abilities within the moral structure that you have in whatever way that is. And that's it. That's all you can really do. There's nothing else you can do. Now, certain things, you also have to be a realist. Some people are freaking out in your country about Donald Trump. Now, you can't
Yeah.
probably, you
A few
can't
people.
probably, yeah, a few people are. You probably can't unelect him. But if you look at it and you're like, hey, wait a second, we talked about influence earlier. If this is your thing, other people like him, and that's their thing, and that's cool. Mostly, white guys in their 50s, but nah, I don't know. I mean, it's not my politics. Also, but I'm using it strictly as an example. If that was the thing that you felt, you start looking around, you're like, a lot of people feel this way. Maybe we can do something. Maybe we can influence each other. Maybe and then it grows. Things can be done, but not everything can be done. So, if you don't like that McDonald's is going to do away with the quarter pounder, don't bother. Just let that one go. Just let it go. If you think that it's weird or unfair that Rhonda didn't do media, but just fucking let that one go. Just let it go, because your energy, you have the limit. We talked about limited but renewable resources. In your life, you have limited but renewable resource energy and focus and stuff. And if there's energy like being outraged, be outraged about shit that matters. If you're going to watch fighting isn't to outrage you about whether Ronda did this or Conor did that or they spent money. That's crazy. Fighting is about fighting. Fighting is about martial arts. It's about combat between great athletes, and it's about digging deep and about overcoming obstacles and becoming more than you were, and beauty of technique and elegant movement and violence, if you like. It's about all these things, but it's not about whether they're coddling Ronda Rousey or Conor McGregor got banned, but who cares? Who cares? You know what I mean? Like, as soon as you just blur your vision of a few of these things and take them a little less seriously, all of a sudden you got some more energy to do some other shit. You can watch 3 more fights in the time that you took to argue on SureDog.net or the Underground or Reddit or whatever about whether or not Ronda should have been stripped of XYZ. That's crazy to me. But that again comes from all of the gossip and the distractions and the structures around the martial arts themselves have become the story. They have over the last 20 years. And that started with the way it started, and it's time to change that. And small efforts have been made to change that through, first a few handfuls and now 20, 30, 50 people that look at the martial arts. And the next changes will happen as we look at the growth and the philosophy and the spiritual elements and all of those things, and we're going to go further and further and further, and eventually people will not bother debating over that, because if it's a sense of justice that is making you debate that, there's some shit going on in other countries, in income inequality, in racism and homophobia and all kinds of shit where you should be putting that energy. You want to watch fight, by all means, again. But if you really enjoy it for now at this stage of your life for whatever reason, go do it. But, you can think about eventually that kind of outrage could really do a lot of good, if you had a political intent or you cared about something. And then you could put the energy back in fighting to watching how the fight goes and watching who they became to go out and be able to give you these 15 or 25 minutes or less.
Yeah, that's well said. Oh, I know that you have to run here in a little bit, and I know when you do your breakdowns, it's almost an exercise in futility to try to predict how fights will turn out. It's really difficult, if not impossible. But is there a way you're leaning in these co-main event fights?
I mean, I'm leaning heavily towards Dominic Cruz. I really am, and it's hard not to. The other guy had. Of course, he hits hard, and if he can just cut off Dom, or Dom doesn't perform well, or the guy has a couple of key answers with his footwork and he gets to him with his right hand, cool, good on him, man. I'd be thrilled to see a kid like that have a big moment like that. But I'm kind of thinking if Dom gets going, you got the first round, the beginning of the second, and after that, Dom's learned so much. Maybe he learns too, and maybe he gets to him later in the fight. But I'd be shocked to see Dominic lose that. And then with Ronda, it's very simple. The way to beat Ronda was outlined. by Holly Holm. Move away from her, draw her in. If she can't get to her, strike and keep her chasing you and hurt her when she chases you. So two things have to have happened because Amanda Nunes didn't have the elite, world-class, fully personally designed ability to do the complex web of skills that it actually takes to do that. So she will have had to do that. So two things have to happen for her to win, or one other thing. The first two together are she needs to have developed the game further than Ronda has developed the ability to beat that game. Both of those things have to happen for Amanda Nunes to win. Or she catches her early with lots of power, and that happens in any fight. That goes for Garbrandt too. But she has to. She did not enter this fight, or at least the evidence of any of her other fights, with the fully detailed, highly evolved, and it was a complex game that they built for Holly Holm, and they built it with two other UFC fights which were designed as Ronda Rousey dress rehearsals. So she needs to have got to that level further than Ronda has got to the level of overcoming that, because there is a way to do it. Garbrandt's trying to do it, Lineker's trying to do it, and Ronda's all trying to do it. All three of them are trying to overcome that.
Yeah.
And the other way she can win is it turns out that Ronda Rousey is damaged and up to her ability. So there's two. If Ronda's on her game and either Amanda hasn't succeeded in developing that well, or she has and Ronda's kept up with her, Ronda will win. But if any of those other two scenarios is not happening, then that's a really tough night for her. And my friend, with that, I'd love to say goodbye. I've got a Skype coming. I've got an appointment, but it's been a real slice. Can we please do this again? I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Oh, I would absolutely love that. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, my friend. And send me a message, and let's do it again later in January.
Sounds good.
Cheers, right, brother. Thanks.
Care. And we want to thank you, Robin Black, again for coming on and joining us. It was such a blast getting to talk some MMA with him, and we can't wait to do it again. I am now joined by David BC Bridges. He's going to help me bring in the new year. And David, it seems like the theme for 2016 is we can't wait for 2016 to be over. Let's move on to 2017.
Which is, I mean, it's kind of weird in the MMA world because as far as the UFC is concerned, 2016 was actually quite excellent. I mean, we started off 2016 with an incredible fight in Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit, which everyone said was fight of the year at the very first fight of 2016. We had UFC 200, which was a crazy stat card. UFC 205, where Conor McGregor became the first dual belt holder in UFC history. And then just a couple weeks ago, we had Doo Ho Choi versus Cub Swanson, which might have taken the crown from Lawler Condit as far as fight of the year is concerned. I mean, 2016 was an incredible year for the UFC. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, a really great year for fight fans, and it's not over yet. Folks, we have a fight this Friday, not Saturday. Usually it's on Saturday. The UFC does not want to compete with your New Year's Eve party plans. So they're doing UFC 207 this Friday. Check your local listings. Guys, you do not want to miss this. We got the return of Ronda Rousey, and we got a great co-main event between Cody Garbrandt and Dominic Cruz. And we would like to wish everyone out there a happy New Year's. And until next time, we are the Broest Bros, you knows.
Plunged into the weeping shelter tower. Skin up our